No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. I'm in here with Bryan Callen. How you doing? Callen. I told you I'm on a bender.
I like Callen. Well, that's what happens when you do that many podcasts. I always am amazed that I can keep talking. Yeah. Somehow, you know, I'm like, I don't really. I think if you don't think about it, it'll just flow.
I feel like such a. I said your name wrong. Let me restart.
You know how many people say that?
Really?
Yes.
Oh, all right, fine.
Callen. That's the problem with having a name like Callen. People say Callen. My whole life they've been saying that.
But now I'm one of those guys. Now I'm on that list.
You're not. You're good.
So yesterday I did 4 podcasts, and the final one, I don't know if you know what it's like to be on rapper time, which is basically you just wait around all day until they feel like showing up.
That's correct.
So I had to wait around until 3 in the morning to do the final interview of the day yesterday.
Till 3 in the morning.
Kodak Black. You know who that is?
I do.
He's a menace.
I know his lawyer.
Really?
Very well. Yeah.
Why? You're suing him?
No, I'm just friends with his lawyer. His friend used to come to my stand-up. Still does when I'm in Miami. Great guy.
Really?
Yeah, Brad Cohen. Love him.
Wow.
And
sounds like a lawyer.
He's one of those dudes who he was on The Apprentice with Trump.
Wow.
And he's just he's a lawyer, but he used to wrestle in high school. He's just a great dude, though. And he's one of those guys who will like. He'll call somebody and be like, look, I like you. I don't want to get into this lawsuit thing. I could make money. He's not about money. He's about doing the right thing. Okay. And he was always in Kodak Black's corner. I think he was in Masvidal's corner. He was Masvidal's, Jorge Masvidal, the guy. He was in his, lawyer. So he's got a lot of high-profile clients.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that you're tapped in with the lawyers.
Yeah, dude.
Go straight to the source.
Not enough. That's the thing about jiu-jitsu and learning how to fight. You know what you're better off doing? Letting the guy punch you in the face and then lying down on the ground and faking the fact that you're having fainting spells. And then you sue him and make all the money.
You're saying that's what this lawyer would suggest?
No, I'm saying that if you had good friends who are lawyers, what you do is you square up with a guy, or you say, I don't want to fuck with you. I don't want to fuck. And if he punches you, and forget all your jiu-jitsu and all your boxing, you simply fall to the ground and you pee your pants, and then you just get that on video, and then you can sue him.
So if you surround yourself by lawyers, they're going to encourage you to do the most bitch-made version of anything that you could possibly do in life.
That's exactly. Now, you're never going to get laid, and you're not going to be a real man, but you'll be rich.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
See, on the other side of things, here in the hip-hop world, buddy of mine got shot at a party the other day.
Yeah, you want to avoid that.
No, I'm just saying that to say that we're probably doing like the least lawyerly thing, which is that we're just like, there's a code of the streets. So one of our friends suggested you should call the cops. Everybody else in the group chat, no.
Damn, really?
Not happening.
Yeah, that's gangster. See, now so great story.
So I'm not allowed to call the cops, even if I wanted to. I don't want to. But
first time I'm in LA, I go to a party. It's my first year. I'm doing Mad TV.
Okay.
I'm 28 or whatever. And you know, I'm a kid from I'd gone to boarding school, went to college in DC, and you know, I did a little taekwondo, and I was a little wrestler in high school, and I was with my buddy who happened to have been black. He was a writer on the show. And this car full of black dudes, kind of, you know, they were in a Mercedes, but they were tougher dudes, a little older. And the guy said to my friend something. He said like, your girl's fine. You know, but he was being a little disrespectful.
Right.
And my buddy, who was from Crenshaw, he was like, ha, thank you, man, I appreciate it. You're a lucky man. I like that car. And they're doing this language that I don't speak.
Right.
And this idiot, I'm looking at them like this.
You called him the N-word.
In New York and stuff.
You didn't? No. Okay.
No. Hey,
I thought that's where you were going.
Don't add racism to my fucking story, bro. Why are you adding racism to my story?
I thought that's where it was going.
No, bro. Come on, get your mind out of the KKK gutter.
I'm just thinking. I'm trying to think like you.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Okay.
And so I said, listen. No. I go. I'm looking at him like this, and my thing is, I'm not afraid of these guys,
right?
Because I'm like, all right, so you're a dude in a car, but I can kind of fight, and you know, I'm not hearing a peep out of you, and I don't like the way you're talking to my friend. So I'm doing this. I'm looking at him going, like, just letting them know that I don't. So they kind of roll off, and I go, don't be afraid of those guys. I'd fight those guys. And my buddy who's from LA looked at me and said, those guys aren't going to fight you with your fisticuffs, dude. Those guys are going to shoot you. And I go, they're not going to shoot you. There's a lot of people around. And he goes, you know how many, and then he used the N-word because he was black. He goes, you know how many N-words are in jail because they shot somebody at a party in front of everybody.
Right.
And that was my introduction to LA. And from that point on, I've always been very respectful, because don't fight in LA because you're going to get shot.
The existence of handguns is the great equalizer.
Correct. Now, if it's just a white dude who happened to have gone to college, I'll fight him as long as he's not big.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if it's a dude I don't know anything about, and he looks hoodie, and he's from in a car on a Honda Civic with a fin on it.
A fin.
I'm not fighting him.
A fin.
Yeah, if he's souped up as Honda Civic, chances are
I don't think those dudes were going to shoot you.
probably not.
I feel like you need to be like speaking their language. You would have needed to do something a little bit more aggressive for them to take it that far.
But plus, it was 4 black guys. I doubt they were afraid of me, even if they didn't have guns. I doubt they were looking at the 170-pound medium white guy.
Right.
And like, we can't fight this guy. I mean,
Yeah, maybe we'll kill him.
Yeah, I would.
That guy right there. Yeah.
Maybe we'll just f him.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh.
I don't know.
Shoot you and molest you on the street.
Yeah, I mean, if it was jail or something, that's kind
I
of.
feel like that's probably mostly looked down upon in the streets.
I would agree with you.
Right.
Like if you get beat up and then that would be.
Yeah.
Like we beat his ass and then we like what?
Right.
But we were frowning the whole time.
Let me blow your mind. I know one rapper, and the story about him is that allegedly there was like a gang conflict, and that at one point he and his friends kidnapped one of their rivals and forced him to do homosexual acts to his friend on camera.
Damn.
And then like rapped about it, sent that footage around. People in their area know about it.
That's gangster.
And when you interview him, you're like, he's made it clear, like, don't ask me about that. So you don't really get to figure out more about it, but that's apparently something that he was involved with.
Wow.
Right.
Well, do you remember the Girls Gone Wild guy?
Very much.
Okay, so do I.
Big inspiration. Was it Joe Francis?
Joe Francis. Allegedly, from what I've heard, a guy did time for a while. I think he was like a connected guy, mafia guy, for kidnapping Joe Francis and doing some stuff to him. I don't know. I don't want to.
Oh, they had a freak off.
So he didn't like the way he had treated a girl that maybe this guy knew.
Right.
And then broke into his house, tied him to a chair, and did some stuff. I think there was a case like that. Look that up. I might be wrong.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's gangster.
But there was some stuff going on.
I mean, that is like if you were to have a conversation with your lawyer friend and you were to ask him, hey, I have this crazy idea for a business. What we're going to do is we're going to go to spring break and we're going to find the drunkest chicks possible and we're going to film them whipping their titties out, making out with their homegirl, etc. Are they giving us a fake ID? We don't know. Are they coherent enough to be signing this waiver? Is there even a waiver?
That was way back when. That was the 90s. Nobody gave a fuck.
I know.
You know, we weren't as sensitive.
Right.
Because groups couldn't galvanize behind social media.
Right.
You couldn't get groups who were activists and really didn't have, in my opinion, most of these activists, whether they're, anti-racist activists, they don't really care about making the world more equal. It's just a way of getting some social clout, capital, and power.
Because I was just listening to a podcast about, you remember the Matthew Shepard thing?
Tell me.
The story we were always fed was basically that this was a gay guy who went to a bar.
He was hung up on a fence.
Right, and some homophobes took him and dragged him behind their car and crucified him, etc. Whole story's fake.
Really?
The dudes who killed him were on meth. They were gay. They're all gay. And they were freaking off. They were having threesomes and shit.
Yeah.
And this story was spun to the public as if these guys were like hate mongers.
I believed that until just now.
Right. And they weren't. They were like crazed meth heads who were like robbing him / like they had all kinds of weird sexual overlap. I mean, when I think about that, if that happened now, we wouldn't have to wait 10 years to find that out. We would find that out like a day or two later because all the Twitter sleuths would put work in. That's
true. But the mainstream media still likes to throw their political agenda into anything that goes on. So if a man who happens to identify as trans shoots up a school or they will say that it was a woman who did it.
Right.
And it's like, no, it wasn't, dude. That wasn't a woman. That was a biological male.
But the right-wing media, of which I now consider you a part of, would be like the necessary correction to that, right? Because they're going to be the ones trying to uncover the reality
but see, again,
of this.
I don't think of myself as right-wing media.
Okay.
I don't. I think of myself as somebody who's responsive to evidence. I don't believe that this country should just be one party. I think the strength of our country is the fact that you have reasonable people people on the left and on the right. And Jordan Peterson said something great, and I would extrapolate this to also why old and young people need to keep talking to each other. Conservatives are here to tell you what we should keep. Liberals are here to tell you what we should change.
Right.
But you can't change everything. You can't keep everything. And that's young people are here to buck against trends and tell us what we need to lighten up on. And old people are here to say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm 57. I've made a lot more mistakes than you have, and I've wasted a lot more time chasing the wrong shit.
Right.
So hold on. Right. So that to me is where I come down. I think you need both. I have my last special, Man Tears, is about this, is about you need liberals and you need conservatives, because there are some jobs liberals are better at, right?
Right.
You got to have an open trait to be in fashion. You have to have an open trait to be an artist typically, which is the cornerstone of any culture, right? Then my joke is like, I don't think polka dots would have been invented without a very gay man looking at like, you know, a ladybug and being like, more, you know, versus conservatives. You want a conservative who's responsible for making sure the planes that land are in a different area than the planes that take off, as an example.
Because if we were to put the people from the Palestinian support refugee camp in charge of landing the planes, they would probably just be like, let the planes land wherever they want. There's plenty of room. Exactly.
That's exactly right. That's a good extrapolation.
Okay.
But that's a good. So the protests are great. Exactly. What we do in this country is go, you're protesting, so you're pro Hamas, or maybe give them the benefit of the doubt. A lot of people just don't want to see a bunch of women and children killed and innocent people killed. Right. You can give them that benefit. It's like gun control. You ever see two people talk about gun control? You're a gun nut. Well, you're a pussy. Conversation over.
Right.
Like, or maybe I like guns because it's the only way I can protect my family.
Right.
And you like guns and you don't like guns because you're against spree shooters. So can we agree that we don't like mass shooters? Let's agree with that. Get guns out of the equation. Let's start the conversation that we don't like spree shooters.
My wife always wants to inform me of the fact that she's uncomfortable with guns.
Always.
And I am always having to tell her that I'm not comfortable with being, hogtied in my own home.
Me too,
so
bro.
I feel like I need some line of defense against that.
I'm right with you.
Right.
I don't want to use a golf club. I need guns.
Right.
Because I can't believe you said hogtied. That's literally the image I go
That's
through.
how you picture it, yeah.
I'm hogtied while they're having their way with my wife.
Right. Oh, wow. So it's like a cuck thing in your head.
Well, it's kind of hot. But here's the thing. Come on, bro. Come on. I'm only one man.
That's hot.
No, but the guy, the Orange, what was it? The Orange State Killer, whatever that guy, Orange County Killer, that guy who was a cop who was killing people. He used to take the man. He would make him lie down.
Right.
He would put a tea. Do you know this? He put a cup and a saucer on him. A cup and a saucer, like for tea. And he'd go, if I hear that cup, I'm going to rip your wife. And if I hear that cup, rattle, if you even move to make that cup rattle, I'm going to kill you and her. Wow. So the guy would have to just stay stone still. I mean, he was a sadist, dude.
Do you think you would just give in and just knock it off right away to just sort of end this ordeal?
I don't know, man.
Yeah, what are you going to do in that moment?
I don't know what I'd do, dude.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to eat all the dicks.
Yeah.
There's times in life.
Wait, you're going to have to eat the guy's dick after
hey, dude,
your wife?
No, you're being literal now.
Oh, okay.
I'm being metaphorical.
No, I thought you were serious. Okay.
I'm an artist.
Okay. Because I don't know what his style is.
You might have to eat. Yeah, he might. You're going to do it.
Right.
There are things.
Eat his cock.
Look, Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, anybody who thinks they can stand up to interrogation has never been interrogated properly. You will break, dude.
Have you been in that scenario?
I've not.
Me neither.
I'm not.
But when you watch people who have recently been arrested or whatever, those videos consistently do unbelievably well on YouTube when you'll have some guy sort of narrating a person in an interrogation room and watching how they slowly crack. And it's very pleasing to watch because I think we all kind of know that there's something about that process that we're not ready for.
I mean, first of all, I could get you talking. Give me 2 days. You're just not going to go to sleep. You ain't going to sleep, and then you're going to talk because you're going to be that's sick torture. Just not sleep deprivation is all you need. Now here's the thing, I know a special forces guy, like a real, nobody, not Tim Kennedy, not Andy Stumpf, not any of these guys that are friends of mine. There's a guy I met who was introduced to me by a good friend of mine. And he was one of those tip of the spear dudes. I don't even know what division he was in, but he said when they wanted to get information, they can get information. I said, what, you sleep deprivation? He goes, well, you don't have time for that. I got to get information now because I'm trying to save my boy's life.
Right.
So there are other ways.
Yeah, because if you starve me,
yeah.
you just starve me for 6 hours. I'm probably going to tell you whatever you need to know.
Dude, I'm telling you, we're everywhere. If I miss one night of sleep and a meal, I'm a canary. What do you want to know? I'll make shit up for you.
Right.
Just let me sleep and I need a snack.
That's how I'm kind of feeling after staying up till 5 in the morning because of Kodak Black. I got like 5 hours sleep, and in my mind, I have suffered through one of the worst torturous experiences that any human being has ever had.
Wait,
to
how was the conversation with him? Yeah, that's all I need to hear. That was great. That was fucking terrible. You went.
I mean, it was a conversation. It's like with some of these rappers, it's kind of like their fan base is so big that it's like anything is pretty significant.
Yeah.
But for sure, it definitely wasn't the conversation I was hoping to have. Also, I feel like my brain at 3 o'clock in the morning is not really like what it is at. Well, it's 1 p.m. right now. Even that seems.
Well, why rappers?
That's just the racket I found myself in. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you a big rap?
I've always been a huge rap fan. Yeah, but I did the BMX thing for like forever until finally somehow I cracked through to the hip hop stuff. Yeah, but I was trash as an athlete. Not great.
We had Ryan Williams on the podcast recently.
Shout out to Ryan Williams.
Killer.
Very aware of him. Yeah.
Great.
But he's
guy.
a park rider.
Yeah, he's a real athlete too. When you look at him,
but BMX, two sides to it. You have like the park riders who are like Olympics. They're basically like gymnasts. They're doing double backflips, triple backflips, all that kind of shit. And then you have like street riders who are more like they go out into the street. You want to find that perfect rail, set of stairs. You're breaking into the water purification center so you can ride some weird transition built into the wall. It's more of like a rebel spirit thing.
You seem to like the extreme, the fringes.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I've always been more comfortable around people like that than I have around people who are not that way. Maybe because I'm a comic, but like, you know, I was talking to these guys. You do a podcast where you interview porn stars and then have sex with them.
This is true. Only plugtalk.com.
Plug Talk.
Only plugtalk.com.
Only plugtalk.com. Yes. Okay. So that's already extreme. So you go from the streets, riding bikes on the streets,
to banging homeless women.
Yeah, homeless women. It's fascinating. But I get it.
Wait, what part do you get?
I get the idea
wanting
of
to f your guest?
No, well, yeah, of course, but chasing, because you've been looking at me with very, very hungry eyes.
I'm so sleep deprived that to me, I could you, yeah.
Oh, is that what it is? Because they're bedroom eyes, dude. You got.
I could nut on your face, and it would be like just as good as if it was like Pamela Anderson.
Yeah, well, I got that face. There's nothing like a 57-year-old face. Yeah,
it's cool. You like fill in the cracks.
Yeah, I guess.
You like peel it off.
My gum gutters. Yeah. Just have everybody watch it like this.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. But yeah, you ever wonder what that psychological profile is about? What draws you to that and where you're going to go from here?
Yeah. Why do I want to press the limits? Because yesterday we also, like, there was a very famous rapper, Pop Smoke, who was basically killed in a home invasion perpetuated by a bunch of like 15, 16-year-old kids from LA. And so one of them did juvenile life. He was basically locked up till he turned 21. And then yesterday we got him on the podcast and got him to tell his story for the first time.
Wow.
So it's like, even within my community, that's going to be a really, really controversial one. Like, why are you platforming somebody who took somebody who was so important out of this world?
I understand why. He was 15. He's 21 now.
Right.
Was he remorseful?
There were moments of remorse, but there were also moments of like, holy this is not like...
He's been destroyed by the system, and...
He's not 100% there, or at least like wasn't 100% aware of like what he should probably say if he wanted to come out of this conversation looking like a good person. But that being said, you know, he's young.
Yeah.
And he did say a lot of the right things, but it was like there was moments that will definitely be clipped more than the more repentant moments in which it's going to appear like he didn't give So that was a lot, but I felt like it was our responsibility to have that conversation because I know the people want to see that.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's like, you know, you can't, it's almost like being a journalist when you interview like when Peter Jennings or whoever it was interviewed Saddam Hussein. Well, I want to know how that guy thinks. I want to know what's up. I want to know.
Right.
I'd like to hear what El Chapo has to say about how he became the biggest criminal. I'm friends with Sammy the Bull Gravano.
Really?
And yeah.
How'd you run into him?
Through Patrick Bet-David, who hooked me up with the. But I was in New York when he was running that whole city, man.
But you didn't do content with him?
I did.
Sammy the Bull?
I did.
You guys did an interview with him?
I have a show. No, I did more than that. I have a show called Best Of. It's like on YouTube. I flew him out to LA. I had dinner with him at my favorite restaurant in Venice. I redid his favorite scene from Black Mass. I redid a scene where he plays Johnny Depp and I play the other guy. We did some acting. But you're talking about the hitman's hitman.
Right.
Killed 22 people. He was a guy who ran the largest crime family in New York, and like I remember it so well. He controlled all the construction. Every piece of glass, every piece of concrete that came into New York City, he got a piece of.
Right.
You understand? So I wanted to meet him because, and I've never been into the mafia and stuff, but the way he spoke and the stories he told on his podcast called Our Thing, I was like, this dude's a writer. He's a storyteller, and he was dyslexic. So it was like this, it was almost like this was a samurai who, because he was dyslexic, found the streets and then said, I'm going to be the best at the streets. But I know him well enough now that I can tell you, if he had been a businessman, if he had been a producer, if he had been something like that, he would have been great at that too. He just came up under different circumstances. That's the great tragedy, by the way, of like a kid like this 15-year-old. And I'm sorry, but also in the black community where there's a lot of fatherlessness, which Usher was talking about, BET Awards, and somehow they took it off the air. But Usher was saying we need to start being, he was talking to his community and he said, you can't have this absentee father shit. Right. It takes a lot of guts to say that. But, what happens is sometimes if you don't have a responsible male teaching you how to behave, it's how you waste a lot of potential.
And this kid actually was like very transparent and like seemingly extremely aware of the effect that his dad being in prison throughout his childhood had on him, which...
There you go.
I feel like a lot of kids in his position wouldn't necessarily be attuned to that.
Good for him. I wish him well. I really do.
Yeah, but he made that clear that he had a lot of anger from being extremely young. He was fighting a ton in school, etc. And that picture this scenario: him and his friends run up in this apartment in order to rob this rapper. They don't know anything about him. He ends up killing him in the process of the robbery. The next morning, he's on his phone and he's seeing these like outpouring of heartbroken people. Now, this rapper's from New York too, and we're here in LA. And in LA, especially being from the gang world like him, New York is a million miles away. It might as well be another planet.
Yes.
So he's not even knowing who this dude is, even though he's like the biggest rapper in New York at that time. He's looking at his phone, realizing how many people had been affected by this, and then it takes like, I think he said 4, 5, 6 months before the cops show up and get him. So he's kind of like camped out in the house, wondering if they know, wondering if this is going to come back to get him. Yeah, insane. But it's weird that I presumably am going to face a shitload of backlash for doing that interview, because that interview would be the most normal thing in the world 20 years from now. Because you see everyone involved in the Tupac murder has done podcasts where they talked about it and everything like that, including Keefe D, who is now facing charges for being in the car.
I don't think that you're doing anybody a disservice. You have a kid like that on. Hopefully a younger person watches that. Hopefully a kid sees that as an example and says, I can't fall into this trap. But yeah, man, when you're a young boy especially, and you've had your heart broken, which is what happens when you don't have a father. It just is. Boys lash out, man. Boys fight. Boy, it's very easy to get a boy to pick up a gun and feel significant, because that's so important to men and to boys. I want to feel significant. I want to feel important. Put a gun in my hand, that'll do it right.
And I feel like I always hear more normal type people saying like that it's the craziest thing ever, people killing over colors, or like, why would somebody join a gang? And when you have this conversation with a young person and you realize the way that becomes their identity once they enter into that, and how that offers them protection from all these other people, etc. And you can really put yourself into that situation, especially if you're somebody who doesn't really have a lot of expectations for yourself. It's
incentive structures. Incentive structures. If you come from a certain neighborhood and you've got your family intact and there's some money in the house, the incentive structure becomes, let's take this young boy who's got warrior energy and it's only getting stronger because hormones are running through his body. He's a walking hormone. It's aggression. It's linear. Hungry, tired, angry, horny, right? What do you do with that? Get him into sports. He needs a physical outlet. I'm not speaking for girls. I'm speaking for guys. Boys need a physical outlet. That's why I'm a huge fan of jiu-jitsu and wrestling and boxing and all those contact sports, or any sport in general. Because it just, you learn how tough you are. You learn how tough you're not, which is huge. You learn where you are in the pecking order. You learn how to climb the pecking order. You learn how to learn. You learn about plateaus. All that shit's so important, man. And if you don't have somebody who sets that example and you don't have a concrete goal that you can see, then, you know, man, you're going to get yourself in some shit.
How often do you still train jiu-jitsu?
I mean, you know, I'll probably train today.
Okay.
If I get back in time.
Yeah.
And I hate it.
I did it for like 6 months, and this was probably like over 10 years ago, and I can fully say it was the best workouts I've ever had in my entire life.
Yeah.
But that I got a bunch of staph infections over the course of those 6 months, and especially now with the porn thing, I just feel like that's like,
no, yeah.
it's just an occupational hazard I can't really get down with.
I always wear rash guards and take showers right after. Really? Always, dude.
Oh, okay.
I don't trust any mat.
I probably wasn't showering enough.
Yeah, you got to shower right away. So first of all, you wear rash guards.
Okay.
On your legs and on your body. A full body, and then you shower right away afterwards. That's so important. Staph is no joke, bro.
And it still gives you the thing that you used to get from it, which is like,
I hate it.
Really?
Yeah, but my son does it. He's 12, so I like to teach him.
Well, why are you saying you hate it? It doesn't give you that peace of mind that it gave you early on?
I box. I still box. I do, but I don't spar anymore. But I think I do it because I'm insecure. I do it just because I just want to feel like I have something
that you have control over, or
maybe
what?
I don't know. It doesn't come from a good place.
Really?
Yeah.
But there's also like the total lack of control that you could potentially have somebody bigger than you on top of you who's able to submit you.
But then you can learn how to navigate that space, right? So you learn like how, if somebody's on top of you, it's the same thing like getting hit. Like you get hit, like everybody does this when you get hit in the face. But you can learn how to keep your eyes open, make yourself smaller, cover up. You can get better at that. You know, I like learning a language. Right? Because everything in life is basically a dark room. I'm good at comedy, no problem. I can navigate that space, put me anywhere. I'll make anybody laugh for an hour, right? But that's because I understand that language. But everything else, I watch somebody play piano. I watch a jiu-jitsu wizard. I watch a guy like Terrence Crawford box. I don't know what I'm just like, dude, that is a dark room. But I like getting a little flashlight and looking around sometimes. That's what happens when you learn the language a little bit. You start to see that there's a system to that.
Right.
You know? That's what I would say to young people too. Like, and I think this is proven in many different, on many different levels. If you want to learn about life and you want to learn about yourself, get really good at one thing. Get really good at one thing.
That's good advice, yeah.
Don't worry about your psychology. Don't worry about that. Just I promise you, get really good. I don't give a shit if it's jiu-jitsu, the piano, I don't care what it is. Get really good, because what you have to go through to get really good, you have to come up against yourself.
Right.
You got to learn how to talk to yourself. You got to learn how to not talk to yourself. You got to learn the kinds of questions to ask, the kinds of questions not to ask because they're not helpful, all that shit.
Okay, so this is something I've noticed throughout my life, is that I've been around a lot of people who are really, really good at one thing, and it essentially makes them like socially handicapped when it comes to other things. Because, for instance, I spent like 20 years submerged in the BMX culture.
Yeah.
And I have friends from that period of my life who will hang out now, and I'll be shocked that they're still making references to BMX videos from 10, 20 years ago. But we're in like a room of like my friends who do like podcasts on this channel and stuff, which to them, obviously that means nothing. And it's like their reference base isn't really like big enough to be able to hang in those conversations.
It's such a great point.
Yeah.
It's such a great point. And the anecdote to that, the way you avoid that is two ways. One, read. Two, surround yourself with people that don't see the world the way you do. Find people that are different than you, that like, you know, see the world differently, you know?
Yeah. And so from my perspective, getting really good at one thing is like step one in terms of your development as a human being, but then getting good at multiple things and finding the synergy between those two things, that has always been the thing that has kind of allowed me to be successful, is that I was all the way deep on this BMX shit for like 10, 12 years before I, through just being a person who was habitually online, started to realize there was this new thing called blogging, and realized that there was opportunity for me to start being like a guy or the guy who was like writing about bike riding on the internet, which was like, if I had strictly kept myself to the BMX world, I would have found out about the blogging thing a couple of years too late. But because I was paying attention to the tech world and the hip hop world and all these different things that were like advancing a little bit faster than the BMX world, I was able to kind of like mash those two things together and do well for myself. And I feel like a lot of people that I see doing well for themselves, I'll come across like a TikTok account of somebody who's an expert on, you know, I don't know, fucking horror movies, and they're doing TikToks where they're breaking down the intricacies of horror movies. I don't give a fuck about horror movies, but I'll see that kind of thing and realize like, oh, this guy might be the one who's kind of like leading the charge of creating this kind of content on this platform, and being the first one to a platform talking about a certain topic has a lot of value.
So interesting, man. You know, I'm listening to, you're saying this and I'm thinking to myself, that just dawned on me. It's a really interesting point, because I'm listening to Eric Weinstein right now on Rogan debate Terrence Howard.
Right.
And they're talking about geometrical shapes and theoretical math. Bro, like, you may as well be speaking Greek, but I can't stop listening to it because I love, maybe it's that I'm fascinated with how passionate they are about the building blocks of the universe that I'll never come close to understanding.
See, I eagerly scrolled past that when I saw it in my subscription feed, because to me, it's just...
My buddy did too. He's like, I don't know what the
yeah, and same thing with the Terrence Howard, the first one that went super viral that Rogan did, because it felt like for a couple days everybody was talking about him like a genius, and then as a couple more days went by, I saw a lot of people talking about him like he's a total psycho. And for me, either way, it's like, I feel like I know where my limit is in terms of stuff that I could reasonably talk about on camera.
But I'm watching it for a different reason.
Right.
What I'm watching it is this. Terrence Howard is very smart. He's got a very, he's got an amazing brain, and he's genuinely interested in these mathematical concepts, and he's self-taught.
Okay.
The problem is, and I'm going to use Neil deGrasse Tyson's great line, he knows enough to think he's right, not enough to know he's wrong. And now he's sitting with a PhD in math. Eric Weinstein is a theoretical mathematician, and I think he studies physics and math, and so he is, and there are probably 6 people in the world that know more about math than Eric. That's how brilliant he is. And that's coming from my buddy who has his master's in math from Stanford, and he's smart as shit. So Eric is like, Eric thinks on a level that's so deep. And what's really interesting about the podcast is to watch Eric educating Terrence on the fact that he's a little over his skis, that he doesn't have all these concepts correct.
But does Terrence seem like he has the humility to accept
actually,
that? Okay.
He does, because at first I was like, this guy's a narcissist, I didn't like him. Now I like him. I can't help but to love this guy because he's sincere. Like, he's really loves, and a lot of it, what he got is right, and it came to him in a dream. And you can hear this badass Eric Weinstein going, dude, look, you've got this half right, or you got this, but you have this concept wrong. So your building blocks are wrong, but you're excused because you just don't have the formal training. It's like seeing a dude who's super athletic and is a great street fighter, you know, and then he gets in with a dude who understands the fundamentals, and he's like, it's not going to work against me, bro. Right. Because why? You're a genius. Terrence Howard may be a genius, but Eric has the benefit. He has an army behind him. Right. He has the scientific community and history. So you're talking about Eric has 10,000 people behind him, and Terrence is trying to do it all on his own. And that's kind of what the podcast is.
I remember when I was like 20, I had a friend who was who went to Columbia, and he was majoring in physics or something, and he had a book about string theory. And I remember picking it up and like really giving it a shot. And really not understanding at all, and then trying to be like, all right, so maybe I can hop on Google and like figure out more of a foundation so I could understand this. And I went back to that book a few times over the years, and I just kind of at a certain point started to realize, like, you know what, this is a little bit too much for me. Like, I just don't feel like I have the kind of brain that is ever going to be able to consume this, nor do I really think that it would benefit me to do so.
First of all, when you get into string theory and you get into physics in general, the last book I read on physics, in fact, was because I interviewed these 2 people on my podcast who are like AI whistleblowers, you know, and I was like, what I got from it is people in physics have knockdown, drag out fights over what it means when an electron like Schrodinger's cat, or like it's called the collapsing cat. The idea of when you see it, it takes on this. It's either a dead cat or a living cat, and that depends on consciousness. They have these crazy arguments that are so theoretical. You'd be like, hey, bro, I have bills. Like, I got kids I got to raise. I don't know what you're talking about. It's almost like it almost requires an obsessive mind.
Yeah.
You know, you ever hear the theory on why men invent shit and women don't? You ever hear that theory? So why are all the greatest inventions basically invented by men, very few by women, very few? Well, one theory, and it makes so much sense, is that men have the ability to focus on one thing for a long period of time. When you're thinking about the theory of relativity and you come up with the idea that time is relative, or that light bends, and you prove that mathematically, or you're like Haley who can prove and predicts when a comet is going to shoot across the fucking sky. That, or I don't know, how about Newton, who invented calculus, invented math or calculus. You need all of your brain for that, and you sit in a room and just think all day. Okay, if a woman does that when she has a kid, the baby dies.
Right.
When she walks into a room, she's imagining everything that could go wrong for that child. Sharp edges, creepy uncle, unpredictable dog, door open that leads to a pool. Is the pool covered? Is there an outlet? She's got to think of 1,000 fucking things. Otherwise, the baby dies.
Right.
The dude comes in and goes, "Bro, is that your truck in the driveway?" That's just the difference between guys and girls.
So this conversation has also been playing out recently in the poker world, which I'm a part of, but I don't engage. I've kind of like realized that there's absolutely no reason for me to wade into the like poker Twitter infighting world, but I'll be observing
no reason.
There's just nothing for me to gain from like hopping into these arguments, right?
I'll be right there. I got to get this. Is a great argument on poker.
No, but okay. So there's a buddy of mine, a guy I know, is like one of the top players. This guy Ben, and he put out a statement talking about how, like you were saying, men have a real obsessive nature that allows them to really, like, you know, when you look at the top 100 poker players in the world, they're all going to be men, which you probably didn't know that, but yeah. I'm sure you'll gladly accept that, because that's just like
not surprised.
Everything. So you could say the same thing about chess. You could say the same thing about Magic the Gathering, I'm sure, which I haven't looked into. But he made a statement like that, and then this obviously triggers the out of like every woman plus every guy in the poker world who's trying to get laid, so they need to side with them.
You go ahead and get triggered, but it's just the truth. But the truth is triggering.
But the thing that they rely on is to say, well, look at all of these societal things that exist that make it harder for a woman to exist in the poker world. Maybe the people aren't going to be as naturally confident in them because they're women, or they're not going to have as many opportunities to be staked or have people teach them.
I don't buy that.
I'm like, are you serious? Yeah.
Men have they're just more of an appetite for risk taking.
Right.
They're more they're just more aggressive.
You don't even need to see anything besides, like, if you look at a final table at a big poker tournament that's all men that are pros, they're quiet, they're orderly, they're like clearly like unbelievably well studied, and then you'll see the same thing with a bunch of women who play poker, even like the best women, and their demeanor is very friendly. They're enjoying themselves. They're appreciative of the human element of being in this environment.
Yeah.
And the guys clearly don't give a fuck about that. There's like something about men that allows us to.
And this is not a competition.
Right.
Women have incredible qualities. Like, I love the idea, the difference between men and women. It's beautiful. You know, what's that saying? Like, a man gives you a house, a woman makes it a home. You know, all that stuff. You know, a man offers protection, she gives you life. You know, I mean, all that stuff.
I put all of myself into YouTube and the content and like whatever this thing that I'm building is. And my wife, in comparison, recently started a garden in our yard.
Yeah, bro.
She got 2 dogs.
She grows. She creates life.
She was probably the one who initiated the conversation about us having a kid.
Of course.
Clearly, she's interested in all of these holistic, organic type of things that increase her feeling of fullness in life.
And you provide and protect.
Right.
That's what you do.
But I'm obsessive, and I have an ability to like really want to dig into the weeds of all these bizarre hip hop storylines and do conversations about it. And when I find myself with an hour or two of free time, once all my emails are answered and the kids are bed, etc., what am I doing? I'm probably watching some obscure YouTube video and learning about some stupid topic. Whereas to her, it's like, you know, she's much better at attending to the feelings of our family.
Of course,
she's going to be the one who's thinking about like, it's your mom's birthday.
Yes,
we need to get her a gift.
Yes.
Why do I not think about that?
Because you are arming yourself with information.
Yeah.
Because you're learning about the world, your surroundings. You're looking, whether you know it or not, you're scanning, constantly scanning for threats. You're constantly scanning for opportunities in which you can bring home bounty. That is so deeply ingrained in us, dude. That's why I own guns. That's why I see like some dude knocking somebody out and I want to see how he did that. That's why I can talk about fighting all day long and I watch the UFC like I'm like a bird dog watches a squirrel. It's like that because I want to know how he's navigating that chaos because the world can turn chaos right quick. And I'm the last line in front, first line of defense.
I feel like the UFC, if all this rap shit disappeared, that I would probably become like a rabid UFC fan because I watch a fair amount of it.
Yeah.
But it's just like I have too much other shit going on in my brain for me to like really start absorbing like the stuff that I would need to know in order to have like a really informed perspective about it. And every once in a while, I'll end up in a conversation with a friend of mine and I'll realize like, oh, this guy has actually a pretty solid knowledge of like who's at the top of the pile in all the different weight classes. And myself, that's just kind of, I'm not that deep. No,
you don't have the bandwidth for that right now.
Right, but I would love to. Like if I had an extra like 15 hours a week, for sure I would be like more deep
Especially if you started hanging out with guys who knew a lot, then you started watching the fights differently and you had people that could help you break it down.
Yeah.
And then you got invested in that fighter and you were like, I wonder how he'd do against that fighter though, because that fighter's got he's got an arsenal. That guy's got an arsenal.
And recently the YouTube algorithm has started to serve me up a lot of these YouTube essays, basically like breaking down certain fighters and the narratives around them and why this guy is so good and why he's actually, this other dude is dog shit, which is the kind of stuff that I watch all the time in rap. I feel like within comedy, that's been an invention of the last couple years where like everyone I know is being fed the same fucking commentary videos by the same channels that are, and it's kind of weird though that like without any of us communicating about it, we just sort of slowly realize like, oh, we're all watching videos about the same comics, even though we are not necessarily tapped into the like, comedian side of YouTube.
They're kind of unraveling a mystery. This is how they do it. It's like, that's why I like this guy named Usyk. He's a boxer. He's the best. And he's not a big guy, but he beats giants. And it's just, he is like, when you see how they break down what he's doing, you're like, bro, this is a magic trick. This is incredible. And like, that's like anything. The minute you have a cultivated eye for something, you're going to just enjoy it. I listen to classical music. I don't know what I'm listening to. I don't know. Oh yeah, this guy's an amazing conductor. This guy, I don't know. It just all sounds like classical. I don't know it. It's not a language I speak. I'm like, here comes a violin. So I give a but if you know, if somebody's a real musician, they can be floored by that shit. It's like anything else.
No, there's so much of that. Should I resort to my question list?
Whatever you want, I'm here for you.
I was actually planning on doing much more research than I actually got into it because of me being up till 5 in the morning last night. I was like, okay,
what are you going to research?
We're going to wing it a little bit more than I had probably planned on.
Yeah, but what are you going to research? It's not that I'm that interesting. It's so funny. I was thinking about that with Rogan. I was like, I'd done his podcast and I did the Fight Companion, but I'm very close to him. I'm not going to ask him to do the podcast because I talked to him on the phone and I watch his guests and I'm like, I don't know how much I have to offer right now. Like sometimes you're like, I don't want to take up that bandwidth. Like I'll just be a spectator. If I have something really original to say, maybe.
Yeah. I used to be extremely like into the idea of trying to get on as many people's podcasts as possible. And I feel like as time goes by, it just feels like I'm just going to accept what comes my way. I'm not really like trying to insert myself into those conversations.
You don't need to.
It's just a little too corny or thirsty to try to be like
thirsty.
Yeah.
I'd be doing it for the wrong reasons.
Shane Gillis hit me up randomly and invited me on his podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I was like overjoyed. I was like so hyped.
That's cool because he's cool.
Yeah, but it's like he asked me.
Yeah,
I was never going to do anything to be like, listen, I think I would be a good guest on your podcast.
Yeah, but Shane's a good guy.
But I would ask him to come on this podcast. But the idea of like asking to be on somebody else's podcast.
But it's cool that Shane asked you on his podcast because that's a big podcast, and Shane's just a dude. Like he's a good dude. He's just a humble, great guy who made it big. But he's one of those guys. I haven't talked to him in a while, but he's one of those guys who I'm sure hasn't changed even a little bit. As a result of his
doing great
success.
But so I'm in his backyard. and it's Louis J. Gomez, him,
Louis.
Matt McCusker, etc., and like a couple of their goons, employees, whatever they are. And holy shit, they smoke a lot of weed. And as I'm back there and I'm watching, like everybody's got their own little project. Like somebody's getting the dab rig ready, somebody's rolling a blunt, somebody else rolling a joint. I'm like, this is almost exactly like the way it is hanging out with rappers.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Minus the elements of like being kind of like obsessed with violence and stuff like that. But then like the conversations about TV when you're just around a bunch of comics.
Yeah.
They're like, that was one thing I took away from that. Is like, wow, I need to watch more Netflix because they're talking about a lot of random shit that I don't know about.
No, you don't, by the way. No, you don't. No. Never say that again. Never say I need to watch more Netflix because you definitely don't.
You don't think that's anything to aspire to? But okay, what about when you're, okay, we're in a room, we're all having a conversation. Somebody starts talking about The Office. I feel at home. I can have an elite level conversation about The Office because I spent so much of my life watching it. Whereas, like, if somebody starts talking about House of Cards, boom, I'm on the outs.
Yeah, but
I can't involve myself in this conversation. I'm
not having that conversation. I'm already bored. I'm already fucking bored in my imagination that you brought it up.
I listen to some podcasts. They start talking about basketball. I'm out.
Me too.
I can't do it.
Me too.
I'm sorry. I just don't know.
But that's like, I don't know anything about cars. So
right.
Schaub and Rogan start talking about cars or something, and they're getting into the weeds. I don't give a shit about cars.
Right.
I drive a Tesla 3, one of those little ones, because it's not that expensive. It's kind of safe, and I don't have to put gas in it. I'm done.
Right. But that's a weird feeling because it's like, you know, if I was on Rogan and we're talking about rap, okay, I'm the aficionado in this room. We start talking about MMA. I can just barely hang on. We start talking about cars. I'm like a kindergartner. Like,
so you don't know cars either?
Literally nothing. And it just doesn't interest me.
Me too. I don't give a
no interest. I don't own one. I lease a car. I have no interest.
I don't care. I lease. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you want? What do you want from me?
But a lot of people grow up with that like fetish for cars. They like get it from their dad or whatever.
Or there's something about machinery. You know, my 2-year-old will not stop thinking about trucks.
Right.
He wants to watch shows about trucks. Some people just have that thing, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what it is. You know, it's just it's thank God for the difference. But you know, mechanical shit. Give a f
I feel that way about sports too. It's just like there's nothing.
Yeah, I hate to
somehow
say
it just never happened.
I love watching certain sports, but I'm not going to get into the weeds about it, man. I'm not. What I think is really interesting about sports, though, is as I get older, like how hard it is to sustain winning and sustain being a winner, and how the best athletes in the world are always in this inner battle with themselves, and that it's so hard to be good, like always. Like we see guys like, I don't know, Djokovic, the tennis player, or we see whoever, you know, whoever it might be, like Ronaldo, these guys are great. It's so hard to be good. The constant self-restriction, the ability to not let your brain take you over, and to stay like positive and have a student mindset. That shit is so fucking hard.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I want to be that guy. No, you don't.
And the idea of getting into that position and then doing what is necessary to stay in that position for another 10 years is really shocking to me. And like, I was thinking about this yesterday when I was talking to Kodak Black, and he basically said that he thought that he could be in the NBA. He's like 5'4" or something.
Did he really say that?
He really did say that, and I was like trying to like dig in a little bit, and I was like, think about your lifestyle. Like you live a lifestyle of pure excess. Like there's absolutely nothing that you're doing to like take care of yourself physically.
It's hilarious.
Or work hard at something physically.
He really said he could be in the NBA.
I mean, he's probably trolling, but you know.
Okay, yeah, but I love it.
Yeah. But I was like, you know, that's the exact opposite of what most rappers are doing. Most rappers are really like cultivating. I think a lot of the shit with the drugs is like they're kind of cultivating struggle. They're like creating some tension that could eventually release itself through music.
Did you ever hear Stanley Crouch? Stanley Crouch was a black intellectual, and Stanley Crouch said something kind of amazing about all the white musicians, rock and rollers who OD'd in the 60s and 70s.
It's a rite of passage.
Well,
maybe not ODing, but
they were copying.
Tempting fate.
Their heroes were who? The great blues musicians, the great jazz musicians, Charlie Parker and guys like that, and Billie Holiday, and all of them had heroin addictions and died and stuff and overdosed. Okay, well, he said something amazing. He said those black musicians who were performing for all white audiences in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s before the Civil Rights Act, they had to come, those black musicians had to come through the back way. They couldn't even go through the front. They were second-class citizens in a real sense of the word. When they would plan their road gigs, they had to plan on a map to see where they could take bathroom breaks and food breaks because they couldn't eat at most of the places along the way. You couldn't just go into a gas station. You had to be really careful. And you had to be careful in the South of being in the wrong town when the sun went down. That's how fucked up it was, okay?
So you're saying they had a reason to be doing heroin.
So they were trying to overcome something, right. Whereas people like Jim Morrison and Janis Joplin and you know, all those people that gave themselves drug, they were subscribing to a problem. They were taking on the characteristics of their black heroes.
But becoming a heroin addict is like intentionally playing your life on hard mode. Like taking all the things that already exist that make life challenging, and then it's like, I'm going to make this infinitely more difficult.
It's what killed music. So when people talk about how music, you know, that drugs can help your music, depends on the drugs. You know, there's a theory that said that what gave the renaissance of the White Album and all those things, the Mamas and the Papas and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young and and the Pogues and all the great music, the Stones, all that shit that came out of the 60s, and they were like, well, there were a lot of drugs. Yeah, there were a lot of drugs. There were psychedelics and there was weed. And as soon as that whole culture moved into heroin and cocaine, oh, the music fucking died. You had people like Lou Reed who stopped making great music. You had the Velvet Underground that just imploded.
But that kind of happens as you get older regardless. Like everybody's songwriting gene, it seems like kind of wears off as time goes by.
Success.
Yeah.
Success, because now you're managing success.
Success, but you give me somebody who's a great songwriter at 20 and then you show me that person at 40 and I can almost guarantee that their skills are going to kind of wither away as time goes by. Bob Dylan would
probably agree with you.
Yeah, but almost anybody. If you think about somebody who is at their high point in their 20s, by the time they get to their 40s, it's like harder to.
Yeah, there's something about the desperation to be heard and the fact that you're trying to prove to yourself that you can do this magic. Like, you know, you're just like, what? I think the only way for an artist to stay productive is to stay hungry. Honestly, you have to have some desperation. You shouldn't be too rich. Right. You should embrace the fact that you get, I don't know, easier, uglier and weaker and all the things that come with age.
So I love Weezer. Yeah. And the first two Weezer albums are like flawless, and then the Green album is like pretty mid, but it's like super poppy, and then they have like 15 other albums after that that have like moments of greatness. Like there's a few really great songs mixed in there, but that's something I'm super fascinated by, is the fact that it's the same group of guys, the same person writing the songs, but they were able to make two flawless albums from my perspective, or from the average like music listener perspective, and then after that somehow they just couldn't keep recreating the same thing.
Novelists are the same thing. Yeah. You know, novelists, and I would actually say that one of the reasons is because as an artist, whether you're a comic, whether you're a movie maker, whether you're a writer, even if you're a painter, and Picasso's the exception to this, and so is Hemingway, but for the most part, you're kind of obsessed with the same question. You get obsessed with the same question. You know, you're obsessed with usually a primary question in your brain. Like, am I brave? Am I a coward, or am I a hero? These are all the things that go on in my head, and I can never let them go. And I try to shake loose of those things. I try to start to forget about myself, and I start to try to write differently, but it's always a fucking struggle. But I think sometimes you'll see like great novelists, they'll have 3 books in them, and that's it, bro. Some people have 3 albums in them, that's it. Bob Dylan doesn't remember how he wrote those songs. He's like, ain't that something? You play his lyrics back to him and he goes, isn't that something? He goes, I don't know who the f that was. Stephen King. Stephen King wrote those unbelievable books, but you know, there comes a time where somehow the light dies.
So how are you doing with getting old? Because I'm 40. How old are you?
57.
57. It's like, as the time goes by, you just consistently have this realization of, oh, there's less and less time that's coming up. You know, I literally have less to look forward to.
Yeah.
I have much less of my life to look forward to than I previously had.
Or not. I'll tell you why.
Okay. But I don't know. I mean, it's kind of the question of how you're supposed to spend your life or what is important to focus on becomes, there's a lot of pressure behind that.
So I think my next 1 hour, you know, my next special is going to be the best thing I've ever done. Mm-hmm. And I don't think so. I know it is. And, you know, and I've surprised myself because I went through like 6-8 months of writer's block, but I've surprised myself, right? So
what's that like, writer's block? Like you just literally can't put anything on the paper?
Yeah, and plus I'm like repeating myself and I'm doing the same shit and I'm obsessed with the same question and I can't break out of that paradigm. So now I got to do something. But I think that what's cool about getting older is that you know, I always say I'm smarter than young people. I'm not smarter, but I've just made more mistakes and wasted more time chasing the wrong shit, right? But I'm not going to tell you that because it's wasted. You have to go through it. You have to go through it. But in some ways, like I have better pattern recognition. I know what not to waste my time on. I know what not to think about. I know what to think about. I know that sometimes maybe thinking is a really bad idea in general. I like getting older because I get way more interested in what I would consider to be universal truths, or I get way more interested in trying my best to get closer to what real truth is. And that requires you as an individual to start forgetting about yourself. You have to start to realize that maybe this self in your brain that you have created is an imagination. It's an imaginary concept. And because what happens is when you're young, you walk around with a strong sense of self. And in fact, if you want to be successful and you want to get certain status and stuff, you've got to invent a persona. You just do. And a lot of that is to fulfill certain sensations, sex and money and being liked and having eyeballs on you, all the things we do. But there's something super freeing as you get older about not only letting that stuff go, but realizing when you have children and you have a wife that other people's happiness is so much more important than your own. And in fact, you go from being a participant and the star of your own movie to being a spectator. And I think you should always work at becoming a spectator in your own life. You should learn how to cultivate what's called the witness. I think is called Sakshi in the Vedanta, which is the idea that you can step outside of yourself and realize that you are not your mind, you are not your body, and you are not your emotions. Right. You are something that has always been. I'm getting spiritual, but I promise you it's accessible to everyone, regardless of where you stand on God or the idea of, you know, this, that, and the other thing. It is possible to get closer to that concept because it's freeing. It's fucking freeing.
Because this is some shit that Sam Harris is always talking about, is that you are not your head. Like our presumption is that there's a computer that is my brain inside of my head and that I'm living my life using this as my way of viewing the world. But in reality, my consciousness, there's nothing like limiting that to what is actually inside of my head right now. Sam studies
the Vedanta.
Right.
So the Vedanta is that idea.
Yeah, I kind of skip out on most of that content.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You're not there yet.
Maybe one day.
You're not, no, Adam, I promise you, you're not there yet. I promise you will be.
The other day
you especially will be there.
I heard Jerry Seinfeld the other day saying that his meditation practice is like the most important thing in his life.
Yeah. He's been reading Marcus Aurelius,
right?
And they all come down on the same thing. Marcus Aurelius was the great Stoic.
Yeah.
So yes to that too. You'd be surprised.
You've been around Ryan Holiday? You guys ever do a podcast together?
I've done a couple podcasts. I like Ryan very much. I got to get back in touch with him because he sent me some books recently.
He's got a new book out.
Yeah, that's what I just got his book. I got to read him. And I really like Ryan. I gotta have him on.
But do you live in Austin?
No, I live in LA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because his bookshop is like 20 minutes outside of Austin.
Good for him, man. He's a special dude, and I really like him. I ran into him on the plane recently. I said hi, and
I've been interviewing him since 2016,
really?
And I first found out about him in like 2012 or 2011, and it was when he put out his first book, Trust Me, I'm Lying, which is about like social media marketing or just marketing in general. And then he does this like hard pivot into the Stoic shit, which to me, I was just like, where the is this coming from?
Oh, you'll be there.
This is ridiculous. But now it's gigantic.
Yeah.
So I was wrong.
But I'll make a prediction for you.
Yeah.
You are an intense guy who goes deep into things. And you're going to look back on this period of your life where you were doing porn and doing all that stuff. and when you're my age, it's going to be great. We'll stay in touch. It's going to be great because I can't wait to watch your pivot.
But you're doing the same shit that I'm doing besides the porn. You're like, you're creating content. You're working on stand-up, which if nothing else is like judged by the way it satiates your ego. If you go on stage and you get a great reaction and you feel good about it, that means that you did a good job at work today.
I'm trying to be original though, and I'm trying to tell a story.
Right.
So it's a little bit different for me now. Don't get it wrong. I love selling tickets, and by the way, LOL Comedy Club, San Antonio, July 12, 13, 14 at the LOL Comedy Club, BryanCallen.com for tickets. I'm going to be there. It's going to be awesome.
But I love how comics do this, that they're like, shout out their upcoming comedy dates, even though they each appeal to like less than 1% of the audience.
I'm the worst at self-promotion, the worst. So just saying that, I'm glad I remembered.
You're not the only one. A lot of comics do this, and I respect it, but it's just always kind of strange. Like, I'm listening to you talk about your upcoming show in Kansas City for 30 seconds on a podcast. Is like, there's 0% chance that this will ever appeal to me. Yeah,
I know.
But it gets you thinking about the fact, like, well, I could go see this guy in real life.
I'm there if somebody, but to me, like, it's so fun to surprise myself with ideas that feel original, that I didn't think I had in me. And then you get a sense of what I'm thinking. You get closer to who you really are in some ways, because you get a sense of what you really and honestly revere, what you're honestly afraid of, what you honestly, want, what you need versus what you want. Those are two different things. So that's kind of the value I get from this meditation that turns into writing, because you've got to spend a lot of time just doing nothing until ideas hit you, or asking yourself honest questions so that somehow filters into funny.
Because Sam Harris just started a Substack, and part of the reason that he specified that he started a Substack, which is like an email thing, newsletter, like a couple times a week or whatever, is that he felt like, and I'm somebody who got turned on to him through books, but for the last 10 years or so, he's basically been doing nothing but podcasting and not writing books. And he said that the thing that he feels like he misses is that through writing, he felt like he was gaining like a very clear understanding of what his thoughts were and what his big ideas were. And like through writing, he was able to like really hone that shit in a lot more, which is like what we're doing right now is actually like very similar to us sitting down in front of a piece of paper and writing. Yeah. So we're just doing it together. But I feel like that, I relate to that a lot, because I feel like if I were to try to sit down and take my thoughts and compose them into something a little bit more coherent, that it might, like, as much as I probably would prefer to listen to the podcast version of us talking about our ideas rather than like reading them, I feel like through coming up with those ideas and consolidating them into a paragraph, that ultimately is like the final distillation of what you're doing on a podcast. That's why Rogan's podcast is such a service, because you don't have to read the book. The author's on there giving you his idea, right? So what is the theme? What's a theme? So you ever wonder what is a book really? A book, if it's a good book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, is the author's argument for how you should behave in the world. That's every time you come down to it, that's what it is. There's a way people are behaving, that's wrong, and the way you should behave if you want the gold is this way. Now, a lot of times it's bullshit. It's like, I'll tell you how to get rich, just all you have to do is these 3 things that nobody else does. Off, No, I think I was done reading business books by like 25. Like I just really felt like there's not a lot that you're going to be able to present to me at this point.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it helps.
Or a lot of people, like celebrities and podcasters in particular, they'll put out a book every couple years, and it just feels so forced. Like this is my big idea that I chose to write a book about, and I'm going to spend 300 pages breaking it down in insane detail, and it's such a turnoff to me when I see that shit on the shelf or being promoted on their podcast or whatever, because it's like, I feel like you've probably got a good 10 minutes about that topic.
That's so true.
I do not want to read 300 pages of you. Like 300 pages is like.
Do you know why they write 300 pages? Because their publisher goes, you can't sell. Most books should be 26 pages.
Right. But as a YouTuber or a person who's used to like creating content on video, it's like, to me, I'll hear that idea. I'm like, that's a 10-minute video.
That's a 10-minute video.
That's not a 3-hour video.
That's right.
It's definitely not me reading a 9-hour book.
100%. 100%.
But they do it anyway.
Yeah. Now, you read great novels, if you have the time.
Right.
And that's why they're great novels, because the characters are arguing from different points of view on what should you believe in God or should you not believe in God? That would be the Brothers Karamazov with Dostoevsky.
If you find yourself, I've found myself in this position a couple times over the last few weeks, you're in a bookstore. What part of the bookstore are you going to gravitate towards? And like what types of books? Like say you have $50 burning a hole in your pocket and you want to buy a couple books for a flight or something.
I would have said nonfiction when I was younger. Now it's all great novels.
Oh, really?
And that you learn more about life from great novels. Great novels hold a truth that's more useful and deeper than any nonfiction book you could read, in my opinion.
Interesting.
I think.
I found like I almost exclusively go to biographies, and then from there, I primarily gravitate towards biographies about artists and musicians.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
But I'm just wondering, like, what is that about me that holds so much more interest?
Probably to make you realize you're not crazy. Maybe it's comforting to know that your heroes who've produced a lot have gone through a lot of the shit you've gone through, which is confusion and failure and anxiety and self-doubt. That's kind of why we read biographies. I want to know how human these great men and women really were.
Right.
And every time you read an honest biography or an honest autobiography, it's so refreshing to go, dude, you were barely holding it together. You suffered from the most self-doubt of anybody. Muhammad Ali said to Floyd Patterson, the reason that I'm always saying I'm the greatest, I'm talking to myself. Because I'm scared to death every time I step in that ring. Scared to fucking death.
I just read a biography that I wish that I could force upon everybody who's talking about trans shit on the internet, because there was this punk band, Against Me, that I listened to a shitload in high school, this sort of like anarchist punk type band, whatever. And in 2014, the singer, Tom, at the time, decides that, no, I'm a Laura now.
Oh, boy.
And he converts or to a she now. And so I read the whole biography, and it was just so fucking trippy for me to realize that this person who meant so much to me throughout high school was unbelievably addicted to drugs because they were dealing with their dysphoria and the fact that they like weren't comfortable in their own body, and that so many of those songs that meant so much to me when I was young were just like fueled by this narrative that I had absolutely no clue about, and goes super into detail about how hard it was to break it to their partner and their family members and the band, etc. And I felt like I gained so much more of a perspective about how difficult that decision must be, because I feel like on Twitter, on the sort of center right leaning world that we probably inhabit for the most part, that there's not a lot of sympathy for people going through that. And I think it's probably got to be one of the hardest things you could ever go through.
I have sympathy for true gender dysphoria and people who feel like women inside of a man's body or vice versa. I think that's a real thing. Or if it isn't, I don't know. I don't comment on that.
But you can also believe that there's some social contagion type shit going on.
I don't even mind that. I would expect social contagion. There are going to be people that kind of like get social clout because they're not doing so well, and maybe they can find a community. All of that is forgiven. My biggest issue is when you start bringing children into it, and when parents or adults are putting their neurosis, their virtue signaling, their political ideology, and it's an ideology, into children, and saying children who are 8 years old should be on puberty blockers, which could have irreparable damages, and then go on to cross-sex hormones, which can render that child sterile. Before that child at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 knows who they are, while their cerebral cortex, or whatever the part the decision making is developing, and all this thing in the name of compassion, in the name of science. You don't have the science. John Money had one case study, and that case study blew their brains out. So, and John Money was basically a child molester. So if you look at the history, a lot of this gender ideology, and Judith Butler, who I read tried to get through both her books. Holy shit, holy shit. I want my month back, But you know, my issue is when it becomes an ideology that is enforced on the way I speak and enforced on our children before they have a chance to make their own decisions. I think that shit's evil. I think the St. Louis Hospital, Children's Hospital, that gives these children cross-sex hormones, that gives these children puberty blockers, that engages in life-altering surgeries on minors. I think that's evil, and I'll always stand by that.
I feel like this is something that people tend to do, where they take the conversation and they immediately guide it in the direction of how it'll affect kids, because we can all accept that adults can do whatever they want with their bodies. Go
ahead. And by the way, I'll fight for your right, and I'll protect you.
Right.
And I'll call you whatever you want me to call. If you have a woman, if somebody comes in and they're a man, but they want to be called a woman, and you want me to, no problem, bro.
Right.
And not only that, not only will I protect your right, I'll protect you from the mob.
I just think that like the kids transitioning conversation is like a very separate conversation from the conversation about what adults do with their body, which obviously every adult is a kid at one point, so it's a conversation that needs to be had. But I feel like I lived through this with the whole viral letting my wife sleep with another guy on camera type thing, because there was like such an obvious sense of rage or just discomfort with it that a lot of people that I would be having conversations with on podcasts would have. And I would watch them try to pose it as something to me that like, this is just inherently up. Then I sort of let loose my perspective on it, which is like, I'm comfortable with this, she's comfortable with this, it's not that big a deal to us. And they immediately pivot into, well, how is this going to affect your kid one day? And to me, that's just like a bullshit shifting of the goalposts. It's like, how it affects, or how my kid might one day think of it is like an entirely separate thing from what it's okay for consenting adults to do with their bodies. And I kind of feel like the same thing with the trans thing, is that the rights obsession with kids is because there's nothing to talk about when you're just talking about adults. Or like, okay, the bathrooms. Like, okay, that is a logical place to take this conversation, because we can all, if we all agree that trans people can transition, then we start thinking about, well, how does it affect me? How is this potentially going to get in the way of my freedom?
Or my daughter may have a scholarship and a dude comes along and says, I'm a woman, and takes her scholarship.
And as a man with a daughter, I too am very concerned about how that might play out one day.
I don't believe in it.
Right.
Men are better. Men are bigger, faster, stronger. Right. And it's like, if you don't know that, you don't do sports, and you're dumb. But, like, that's mammalian biology, mother.
There's another side to that, because I come from the BMX world. The other day I'm watching the X Games, and in the like 10 years that I've been kind of out of the BMX world, like I still pay attention to it, but I'm not paying attention to like all the minor developments or whatever. But now there's a lot more women's contests, and that wasn't really a thing throughout my time in BMX. And I'm watching who's winning this contest, and I mean, the person who's like dominating the women's event is a woman, but like, I would be willing to bet that this person probably has testosterone levels higher than you or I. Like if you really get down to it,
that's fair.
The attributes that are going to make a woman truly great at a sport, in particular a sport like BMX, which is like very reliant on upper body strength, is going to be basically the woman whose natural biological chemistry skews towards what the average man is like.
Yes, but let me push back on that, because I've always said that I don't know why MMA women don't get their due. Why are feminists not holding MMA? Women like Rose Namajunas, women like Holly Holm, women like Misha Tate, women like Ronda Rousey, these trailblazers.
Right, yeah.
You know,
why do they never talk about that?
Kayla Harrison, who is the best judoka, 2-time gold medalist.
Because to them, the UFC is Trump world.
Right.
So they don't want to celebrate any part of it.
Right. And these women have done more to change the hearts and minds of chauvinistic bros by showing that they can fight with incredible skill, ferocity, a desire to win, and they put themselves on the line.
Because 10, 15 years ago, Dana was saying there'll never be a women's division in the UFC.
And they busted their way into the most male-dominated arena on the planet.
And I have to congratulate them on their media training, because over all these years, there's been so few times in which I've seen a UFC fighter or a commentator or anyone involved in it say anything or do anything that was perceived as sexist or up towards the women in the sport.
Yeah.
Like I just know that the UFC media training program that they put everybody through was very, very thorough, because I've seen few controversies in that regard.
They needed it, because look, so you look at, like, I was looking at Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who is one of the greatest female fighters on the planet. And she was I was in Vegas, I was there, and I was looking at her. And these women are feminine. They haven't compromised their femininity at all. Paige Van Zandt's a gangster motherfucker. And she's sexy as it gets. These women are hot. When they show up to the fights and they're not fighting, and they're not sucking weight, they're in dresses, they got bodies for days, they're beautiful, they're sexy, they're accomplished, and they're very feminine. They're very feminine. Oh, and by the way, the UFC's also been an incredible platform for gay women, for champions like Amanda Nunes and a number of other women that have their wives or girlfriends in their corners, kissing them afterwards. So the UFC has been more progressive in a real sense by taking it and putting it in the actual arena and capturing eyes, male eyes, and having us root for those women with the same ferocity we do men. Show me anywhere else. The WNBA couldn't do it. I mean, you know, women's
feels
tennis,
like they're kind of getting it together now. People are starting to give a
finally, maybe, but at the end of the day, what I'm saying is that the women have those women, and I'm waiting for Naomi Wolf and all these feminists to write a book on these women, but they don't watch the UFC because they don't know women like Naomi Wolf, all due respect, you know, I haven't read her book, but you know, these famous feminists like Gloria Steinem, they write books that nobody really reads unless you're an academic. Do you know one person that's ever written a book? I read a book on feminism. I don't. You'd have to go to colleges. You got to go to
avoid it.
Yeah, you have to go to Brown University and find a bunch of women in women's studies. Okay, fine. But for the most part, they're not doing anything to change hearts and minds or change the world at all. The women are getting in there and punching each other in the fucking face and getting really good at jiu-jitsu and really good at boxing and really good at MMA. Those are the feminist heroes. Those are the badasses.
My favorite moment in any given UFC fight is when so much anticipation, you're watching the walkouts, and you've got these two girls and they're ready to go to war. And then the ring girl is in there.
Yeah.
And she's got the most luxurious blonde hair and the full face of makeup and the fake tits and everything. She's tan. She looks unbelievable. And then you have to just contrast and compare that with the girl who's about to fight, who has her hair up in cornrows, no makeup, like you said, like dehydrated, whatever, like all this shit. And you just see those two things side by side. And for a moment, that just makes you have to consider how strange what we think an attractive woman is, because it's so useless
she's going to
from
war.
a utilitarian sense.
Yeah, she's going to war. Ronda Rousey said the greatest thing ever. She goes, I don't have a body that's built to millionaires. I have a body that solves fights. It's fucking great. But she's sexy and beautiful.
Right.
You know, that's what I think is always lost, man. That's my soapbox on that shit.
Right.
So, you know.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about this, is that how affected do you think that the podcast / comedy landscape has been by there being this new emergence over the last couple of years of all these commentary channels and people who are sort of seeking to take the hours and hours and hours that you're doing of content throughout a week and then to consolidate those narratives into these tightly packaged videos? Do you think that that has changed the landscape for content creators like you?
No.
Because I thought of doing this interview because I was watching a video of somebody talking about you, and I was like, fuck, I would like to have a conversation with Bryan. I should hit him up. But I was like thinking, like, this is kind of strange that I'm not watching the fighter and the kid. I'm watching a video that's breaking down what's right or wrong with the fighter and the kid. Yeah,
I know there are a lot of videos like that.
Oh, you avoid this?
I've never watched them.
Oh, okay, that's smart. Yeah.
But it's not that it's smart. I think it's pretty flattering that there are enough people that hate or love us to make that many videos. So we had a big impact for a long time, and you know, we used to be so popular. Now we're not as popular, but that's young people who are being creative. They might be being negative, but maybe there's a lot to not like. Maybe there is a lot to criticize, you know, but that never bothers me.
But you don't wade into that.
No, I'm not going to watch it because part of it I might agree with, part of it I don't agree with, part of it might hurt my feelings, part of it might make me laugh. But I don't listen to good or bad things said about me.
Really?
And I especially don't listen to the good things because I don't want that to define me. Because what will happen is if you say something good about me, if I get a good review about something, I'm going to try to aim for that the next time. So So I get very worried about that. I don't listen. I don't read comments. I don't do any of that because I don't see any positivity in it.
So
like I dropped my thing on Instagram, and I heard the comments are very good. I don't care. I love it. Thank you. But I can't read it because I'm too sensitive. I'm going to want more of it.
Really?
And I can't get attached to likes.
I feel like 10 plus years of reading comments on every single thing I put out on YouTube. Everything.
Oh, you're out of
I will read
mind.
every single comment on this. Yeah.
You will?
Yeah.
Dude, you're a sadist. Why? I mean, a masochist. Why would you do that to yourself?
Well, you're saying that it could so easily have such an effect on you. I don't really think it's going to have an effect on me.
Well, you might be inoculate yourself after a while. You're like,
that's what I'm saying. I would compare it to the fact that like a couple of years ago on Twitter, I would almost never see someone dying, and now almost every morning when I'm looking at Twitter, I'm going to see like murders.
I don't like that.
Terrible, like the worst things you could ever expect.
I don't like that in my brain.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I know there's a reality to life, but facts are endless.
It's hard for me to remember life without seeing all this death on Twitter.
I know, and the problem is it takes you away from your best self. I like the expression, maybe it's my expression, your best self is clearing his throat in the other room. And, your job is to get to your best self, and you will. I know you will, Adam. I know you will. But you have to go through all this insanity. You have to go through. Your brain likes chaos right now.
I do.
It.
Like myself. Like and people always are telling me like you need to look at social media less. You shouldn't be on that shit as soon as you wake up, etc. Like I've always been a person my whole life where all I want. I used to be a person who would wait by the mailbox when I thought that I had a magazine coming.
Yeah, because it's the way you deal with your neurosis. Trying to sit still and do nothing. Try that sometime. You can't do it.
No,
it's
I'm
okay.
At that,
yeah, but you're going to have to come to that, and it will come to you if you don't come to it. And we are living in a time where if you're always something's always there's a podcast, there's music, there's your reels, there's the infinite scroll, there's stimulus, and I believe, and that's what my next special is about. I think that is as close to the devil as it gets, and it is
constantly being stimulated.
It's all noise,
really?
And it means nothing, and it's all it does is keep you from your true self, and it keeps you from truth, and it keeps you from the best version of yourself. So do I watch these videos? No, but I'm glad they're making them, even if they're bad, or even if they're mean, because it's young people who are creative and they're finding an audience, and they'll go from that to something else eventually.
But you don't feel like you're kind of operating in the dark in terms of like not really being fully aware of what the reaction is publicly to the stuff that you're doing? Like I want to read the introspective comments that are pointing out why I was annoying at a certain point in the video, or Adam did a better job on this one, or this was the worst podcast I've seen in a long time. I really want to know.
No, I listen to this. First of all, I'm a good person. Second of all, I mean everyone, everywhere, all the best. Third, I know who I am. I don't need that validation. I recently found out somebody was mad at me who was a comic, and I was like, why? And they think that I said something, and I was like, I know I didn't, because I like them. And I know I didn't. And I would never say something publicly. If I didn't like somebody, or I thought their comedy was bad or whatever, I would never say that publicly. Never. Because I don't want to hurt their feelings. And I would say it, if I have a problem, I'll say it to your face. But I'm never going to use the microphone to say something I regret. And if I do say something I regret by accident, I always apologize. And I apologize for anything I did if I find out I hurt somebody's feelings, or I found out that I did something wrong, I confront that shit right away. I hate having unfinished business. I can't stand it.
But it's interesting you say that, because like teeing off on somebody is basically like the best way to build an audience on YouTube at this point, unfortunately. But that, like a video, I know like a lot of people who are in the like fledgling stages of them trying to become YouTubers, and a lot of dudes I see will try to make like documentary type videos about different stuff going on in rap. And primarily the reason why the stuff doesn't necessarily seem like it's taken off is usually because it's not negative enough. Like the framing of the title needs to be sinister. It needs to sound like they're unearthing something horrible.
Lizard brain.
And it's up, but that's just like realistically most of the people who I've seen kind of rise to prominence in that field. It's not by just heaping praise upon people.
So I would always ask, how is it working out for you when you're immersed in that world and you're creating that world? I want to know. Come talk to me in 10 years. Tell me how it worked out for you. Tell me what happened. Because that same critic, I promise you, that same critic that you've become so good at being will come back and get you when it's your time to try to grow, when it's your time to try to create.
Okay.
I'd rather be the person in the arena fighting than the person on the outside going, he's a bum.
I would say that the critic is also fighting. Like the critic, the work of a critic is no less important than the person who the critic is documenting.
If it's a real critic,
right,
and they're cultivated, and they've
but even a bad critic is probably like in the stages of figuring out how to be a better critic, right? I know people who are music critics for the New York Times.
That's different. That's not what I'm talking about.
And so right, but that's somebody who you would surely say they're doing something honorable.
Yeah, because that's somebody who understands that there's a criteria for art. So there's good art and there's bad art. There's shit podcasts, there's great podcasts. There's shit comics, there's great comics. There's hack comics. There's musicians who rely on tricks and hooks, and then musicians who are telling stories and they're original. You need people who can tell the difference. That's what's good about the internet sometimes. What I like about the internet is that if you're lying or you're selling bullshit or you're doing bullshit, people will be there to tell you. People will be there to be like, hey, this listen, for a while with The Fighter and the Kid, we were not our best. We just weren't. And if there are people that called us out for that and made videos, probably right.
Okay, because I've been through things quite similar to what I think you guys have been through, in the sense that maybe a year and a half ago, I had a couple of different dudes, really a whole bunch of dudes, who were on this platform doing podcasts, co-hosting with me / doing their own podcast, and a bunch of them chose to leave at the same time. And they didn't just leave, but they also painted, negative narratives about me and the brand on the way out. And that made it so that I was going through one of the harder things that I've had to go through in my life. But then in order to keep the business going, or to keep, the podcast going, is like, you can't just duck off for a couple months. You got to keep going. Yeah. And so I'm having to go on camera on a consistent basis. And in my head, I'm the worst version of myself.
Me too.
Yeah. And so when I'm watching you guys go through similar stuff with the whole Bobby Lee thing or whatever, it's kind of like, I'm recognizing that that's probably where you guys are at. You felt like you're under fire.
I deserved.
Okay.
Bobby Lee I love him, and he's my friend, and I was acting on bad information, and there were things, and I was protecting a friend, and the way I spoke to him was, and I've said it, and I said it right away, and I've said it to Bobby, and I've apologized unreservedly, right? Because I love him.
And I've heard that. I was
fucking wrong, and sometimes in life, and it doesn't matter how old you are, you fuck up, and I fucked up, and in that moment, I was a bad dude. I was angry, and I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at something much. I was angry at the weather, and I was going through a hard time. And Bobby Lee was what got caught in my tusks. No excuses. No excuses. Unforgivable. Maybe and we've texted and kind of like, made things okay on text, but it may never be the same. And that's what I get. And if you up on the level that I did when I spoke to him, the way I spoke to him, without, like, he didn't deserve that shit. He didn't fucking know what was going on. He didn't know. He was like, what? And I did that. Well, you know what? I'm a pretty good guy. In that moment, I was a piece of shit. And sometimes when you act like a piece of shit, you got to do the time. You got to pay the price.
When I watched how Brendan approached the Ariel Helwani thing around that time, as well as the Bobby Lee thing, as well as like a few other little things, I saw some of myself in that, where I felt like he was riding a high. He felt like everything was great. And so he started to kind of speak about his peers or other people in the same ecosystem as himself. He didn't necessarily show the same amount of respect that I feel like he's been humbled. I feel like he probably would approach those situations way different now. And I've been there for sure.
Nothing good comes out of that. I spoke to Ariel after that. I spoke to him about that. Ariel's like, what the are you guys talking about? Why are you coming after me? I got, what I do. I didn't do anything. And he's right. He didn't do anything. And we were just talking. It was Rampage, and I knew he and Rampage. And I think I brought up the fact that I said something about Ariel being sensitive or something, and that's not a bad thing. But, like, Ariel didn't ask to be brought into that. He's never said anything bad about us. Like, he wasn't, like, he didn't ask for that. So, again, when you have a podcast that a lot of people listen to, you can up sometimes, and you can say things. And that's again, when that happens, you've got to make it right. I like Ariel. I think Ariel's, I think he's a great reporter.
As an MMA casual, I've always been a huge fan of him.
He's he's a great reporter. Ariel is a guy who tells it like it is.
Right.
He's honest. And
casual fans like me really need somebody like him to be able to observe his observations and be like, okay, he's probably way closer to whatever.
He wears his heart on his sleeve, and I think Ariel is here to stay. I think Ariel's going to always be somebody who is a very valuable contribution. So I've never had a problem with Ariel,
right?
I would never get into this back and forth because I like him, and that's I've only interviewed with him once or been on the show or talked to him. I can't remember what it was, but I don't have any beef with that guy. I don't want that. I don't think there's anything bad about that guy. I don't want any problems with him. So yeah, but that was a case where I think Brendan said some things, and it was like, hey, come on. Let's not do this. There's enough of that. I never want to be part of it. I don't want to be part of it. I don't like it. First of all, I don't feel that way. And if I do dislike someone, I'm either going to say it because I'll say it to their face, or I'm just going to keep it to myself because it doesn't do any good.
But don't you feel like as a podcaster, in order for you to be great at this role, that you need to, at times, offend and upset people? Or no?
No, what I think my job is to first make people laugh and be a silly goose. That's what Fighter and Kid started out as, just being funny and just doing crazy shit. Two dudes in a treehouse acting like 11-year-olds.
But that's interesting because I feel like a lot of podcasts start off goofing around, and then as time goes by, goofing around is like less appetizing to the audience. So you start to get into topics, you start to get into drama, you start to get into like more current events, and it kind of like a lot of podcasts that I listen to kind of seem like they go through this transition because the audience keeps upping their expectation of what you are going to bring to the table.
If I see things that are crazy, if I see the world on fire, I'm going to talk about it. If I see somebody who's being a an asshole, I'm going to call him on it. I'm going to tell the truth. If I think that the current president has dementia or has what seems to be some senility, I'm not going to not say it. That's not being negative. That's just being honest.
Right. But that's also like the safest take possible.
Probably.
Literally every person, including members of his own cabinet, think that he did a terrible job.
Yeah. I don't know.
We're talking about the debate, but
Yeah. I don't know. I don't like the darkness, man. I don't like it. I don't like going into that because it's never ending, and it eats you up. It fucks with you.
And I feel like through having been through the ringer in terms of your public perception, you gain that humility because there's a lot of people that I could name who are YouTubers, content creators, or whatever. They've never been through a major public crisis. They've never been smeared as the worst person on earth. So as a result, they're still able to do the thing where you hop on Twitter and you quote tweet somebody who said something, and you basically say, "You are the biggest piece of shit who has ever lived." 50,000 likes. I see that dynamic all the time.
All good.
And that gets turned off as soon as the idea that you're a piece of shit gets inserted into the narrative where, any controversial opinion that I have on Twitter is going to get quote tweeted and somebody's going to say, "You let some dude fuck your wife." That's not the worst thing because that's kind of like irrelevant to almost everything. But like a lot of times, if you're someone who's just been through the fire, like you'll see somebody make an offensive statement and then somebody will quote tweet them and say, maybe you should start paying your employees, and they'll post like a screenshot of an article from 10 years ago about somebody who like sued you and didn't get paid on time or something like that. Something completely irrelevant, but that's used to debunk the entire statement that you just made.
So do you want to get involved in that world? You'll never win.
No, I don't think that's a good world to be in.
Dude, it's like, and it's not good for them. Like, I don't think, the funny thing about all of that is you get a bunch of likes. If that's what you're going for, then you have a gimmick, and a gimmick never lasts. Do that. That'll last for 2 years, 3 years if you're lucky. Then what? I've seen this. I see the crisis. When people build their life on a house of cards, when they build their life, for example, on getting as many likes as they can with spectacle, with doing stuff. All right, but what's the second act?
Like, are you trying to do this forever?
Style versus substance. Like, what are you actually building? How are the foundations of your house? Because the wind will always blow. And if you are fickle enough, if you are actually dependent on that audience goes away. That audience is fickle, man.
Because, we saw the narrative at a certain point, because these commentary channels were putting out videos saying, Bryan was leaving The Fighter and the Kid to go work for Steven Crowder. And even when I went to do the interview, when I appeared on The Fighter and the Kid, I was like surprised to be like, oh, okay, so you're not even necessarily on that show.
That was never going to happen.
Okay, so that was never a possibility.
Never going to happen.
We thought we were seeing you go full-fledged. I'm a conservative commentator now. Comedy, MMA. No, I ain't talking about that shit anymore.
No, that's not my thing.
Okay.
You know, I went over to Crowder because I'd known Crowder from before, and you know, he asked me to come on and third chair and be part of Mug Club and all that stuff, and you know, and there's a lot about Steven, and I think, you know, I mean, Steven gets a lot of flack, but I think Steven is a very thoughtful guy, and he's a conservative and unapologetic, and I think that has a place in the conversation. If you have a problem, like, hit him back with good ideas, different ideas. You know, that's it.
But did you think that career arc was going to be better than it ended up being? I
never think about that stuff. I just kind of was in a time in my life where I had this opportunity. I wanted to see how it would work out.
But are you not on there at all anymore, or just occasionally? I haven't
done the show in a long time.
Oh, okay.
Because, you know, they're in Dallas.
Right.
So they do their thing over there. And I'm here. And I got the podcast. And, you know, so, but I have a podcast behind the paywall,
right,
which is Mug Club. And I love doing it. It's called Off Limits. And then I have I release a free episode on Thursdays. But that podcast is where I talk to people that are smarter than I am, that you know, I just want to get to know. Yeah, man, I don't know. You're always in this world, in this culture war. If you align yourself with whoever it might be, you're going to get a whole lot of pushback on the other side. But at the end of the day, I'm a fucking comic. And that's what I love to do.
Right.
An actor, but a comic.
Right. There's something interesting about comics that I was thinking about recently when I was listening to...
Wait, let me say one more thing about Crowder.
Sure.
Part of the reason also that I think Crowder's important is I'm terrified of the authoritarian left. I think the far left has lost their mind, and they are my enemy. I don't like them. I don't. I think they are bad. I think this communist, postmodernist insanity is dangerous. I think these ideas have come out of academia, and I think they should be fought tooth and nail. And I think the only thing that's going to come from them is destruction. That doesn't mean that I think all progressive ideas are bad. That doesn't mean I'm a racist. That doesn't mean I'm against blah, blah, blah. I'm talking about the authoritarian left. I'm talking about the left that won't talk to anybody else. I'm talking about these people that try to cram legislation down our throats that make no sense. Hate speech laws, they're anti-First Amendment, all that stuff. Go f yourself. They're not my friends. Go f yourself. And one of the reasons that I align myself with Crowder is he may be a far right guy. He's not a far right guy because I don't like that word, because that means you're racist and all that stuff, which he's not. But he's a guy who stands unapologetically on the Christian right. I'm not a Christian, but there's something about that is that necessary and intelligent, and by the way, funny a lot of times, pushback to that insanity over there. And if they don't like me,
but would you consider this an example of audience capture, that you spend a disproportionate amount of time talking about what's wrong with the far left, and probably from the perspective of wanting to appeal to your fan base?
I never think about
talking about the threat to democracy that is Donald Trump is not necessarily as attractive.
I think that's an important conversation to have too. Right, I've always been pretty critical of Trump, and
I realize I am upsetting a large percentage of the people watching right now by me even saying that too. So
no, but I've always been I've been critical of like you can separate the man and his policies. You know, I think Trump has a strong command of the economy because he was in the economy and you know, made money. I think he understands. He's got a very comprehensive foreign policy idea. I think the country was doing very well under him. Now, a lot of people have a problem with him because they think he's a con man, or they think he's about Trump first. He tends to be a bit of a narcissist. So there's certain things about him. But as I have to say that as the man gets older, and as I watch more and more, I definitely am way more, I'm warmer to him by far than I am to what has happened to Biden and how he's been hijacked by people like Jamal Bowden, who just lost that race, or AOC. Yeah, you keep those people. Go keep those people, because I don't see the world the way they do. And I will fight against that. But does that mean everything the Republicans have to say is something I agree with? No. No, give me the issue. It depends. Give me the issue.
Right.
But I try to be informed, and I try to know where I stand, and I try to make sure that my opinions are based on thought, not attitude, not fucking emotion and feelings. Hard to do, but that's my job.
Because it feels like there's a huge percentage of the country who, if you were to ask them to define what makes them a Republican or what makes them a conservative, would probably have almost nothing to say. But they know that they don't like Joe Biden, they don't like the America that he represents, and that they think that Trump seems all right, and they think that...
Well, first of all, Joe Biden, for the most of his political career, was Democrat heavy, Republican light. He was this moderate in the middle of the road. He was a power broker. So,
right.
So if you look at his political career and his voting record, he was actually he was Republican light.
And if we were to have like a real deal progressive here, they would not probably have all that much positive shit to say about Joe Biden, aside from the fact that he's running against Trump.
Yeah, I would say that for me, I don't think that I think government should always be treated as a necessary evil. The founding fathers understood that, individual liberty is paramount.
I was going to say those people are coded right because, regardless of ideology. Yeah, but they see that as, you got to give it to the Republicans that they've done an amazing job as painting supporting Trump and being a Republican as basically representative of being a good American.
I think it's important to understand, I grew up all over the world.
Right.
I lived all over the world until I was 14. And in a lot of those countries were socialist utopias. India at the time, Pakistan at the time. I saw what real poverty is, man. The United States is the grand experiment. And Western thought and the United States, are there issues? Of course. But people forget how lucky they are that they live under representative government, that they can give the president the finger. Oh my God. Never in the history without getting tortured in some dungeon somewhere. The fact that they have enough protein and carbohydrates and fat to run their body. They don't watch their children die of disease and starvation, which was the norm throughout history. These are important things. The Enlightenment gave us a lot of goodies. Western thought gave us a lot of goodies. This is the longest standing democracy on the planet. The founding fathers, in my opinion, solved the political problem. The fact that we have checks and balances in our government, that, why our government works? Power doesn't reside in one group's hands. It's just government. It's impossible. Everybody's got their fingers in the trough. That's the way the founding fathers wanted it. You can't let one person have all the power, because they would take all the power. All of us would. And James Madison, thank you, and John Jay and Alexander Hamilton figured out a way to keep factions from getting too strong. And for that we owe them a great debt of gratitude. Now the threat is always clear and present. We are always in danger of losing our freedoms, always. And we'll invent laws in the name of equality. We will socially engineer equality, and we'll talk about things like equity. And at the end of the day, all of them take your power, your freedoms as an individual away from you. But they do it on the right and the left. The right wants to control your behavior because they're religious. The left wants to control your behavior because they believe in enforcing equality at all costs, right? And then the rest of us are like, hey, bro, I'm just trying to live my life and figure this shit out. I'm trying to construct a life. I got to feed my kids. Right. I got to build a business. This is hard. Like, you got me talking about pronouns. I don't even know what a pronoun is. I got to pay bills, bro.
Right.
I want my kids to keep smiling.
Because the pronoun thing is like the worst thing for the left to lean on. But you also might say that like the pronoun thing doesn't come out of the mouth of the Biden administration that much.
They know. Yeah, they're like,
yeah,
all right,
they know.
Careful.
Right.
Don't talk about socialism and pronouns. It's like fucking,
right. Or like the women or the men and women's sports thing. It's like, this is not a winning issue for them. They know that. They're trying to talk about it as little as possible.
Yeah.
But it's also something that really like needs to be solved in order for society to move on past that being the thing that we're talking about next time around. This is part of
democracy. Yeah. As long as I always hear people yelling and there's hate and we get a bunch of comments going, you fucking idiots. My podcast, I love reading out the comments a lot because they're like, hey, Brian, you moron. You don't.
I thought you didn't read the comments.
No, it's part of my show on Off Limits. Yeah.
Okay.
It's great. And I always want the negative ones because then I get to kind of like, push back or laugh about it or realize that they were right. That I don't mind, but that's democracy at work. Freedom of expression, free speech at all costs.
That's what it's all about.
Yep.
Okay, so we're almost at 2 hours now.
I gotta get out of here.
Yeah. What do you got coming up?
Well, I'm going to Idaho.
Oh.
To go to a rodeo and hang out.
Comedy or just going to a rodeo?
Then I'm going to LOL Comedy Club.
Okay.
And then I got a bunch of dates. I got a bunch of comedy coming up.
Nice.
So it's going to be good. I'm just on the road, man. And I got some TV stuff coming up too, which I'm excited about.
Hell yeah. But, shoot me a text. I want to come see you do your thing in LA
100%,
sometime. Yeah.
100%, man. We gotta hang.
That'd be dope. Yeah.
Yeah. You're always welcome back on the podcast too. Whatever you want.
Hell yeah. Sounds good.
I appreciate you, man.
No, I appreciate you, Bryan. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me. It's a good conversation. We can
Callen.
it out.
Callen, not Callen.
Bryan Callen /Callen.
There it is. Appreciate you, man. No Jumper. Coolest podcast. Check us out on YouTube, TikTok, Patreon. Like, comment, subscribe. We out.
No Jumper. That's a good fucking name.